The shift happened while everyone was looking somewhere else, while the headlines focused on political deadlock, while the analysts tracked the parallel market's daily fluctuations, while the gurus recycled the same old predictions. Iraq quietly changed direction, not on the surface, not in the news cycles, but in the fundamental orientation of its economy, and most people completely missed it. Let me take you inside what just shifted. On February 10, 2026, Central Bank Governor al-Alaq sat down with Rudaw in Erbil and delivered the most definitive monetary policy statement of the year. To the casual observer, it sounded like a denial. Alaq stated flatly that the central bank is not studying the topic of changing the exchange rate. He called market speculation great confusion and misplaced. He dismissed any link between the budget deficit and currency adjustment as an incorrect link. But you have to understand what the governor was actually doing. He was shifting the entire conversation away from the exchange rate and toward the foundations that make a stable rate possible. That is the shift that most people missed. Alaq revealed that Iraq's foreign reserves now exceed $100 billion, including more than 76 tons of gold. He disclosed that the money supply stands at approximately 100 trillion dinars. And then he gave us the number that defines the new direction. More than 80% of that money supply exists outside the banking system. 80%, trillions of dinars circulating in the shadow economy, invisible to tax authorities, unavailable for productive lending, and entirely beyond the reach of monetary policy. In the old direction, this was a problem to be ignored. In the new direction, it is a target to be captured. Alaq explained the mechanism with unusual clarity. If money owners feel reassured about the existence of a fair and transparent tax system, they will bring their money and deposit it in banks. Reassurance, that is the product the new direction is designed to manufacture, and the tools being deployed are unlike anything Iraq has used before. On January 1, 2026, Iraq launched a mandatory advanced customs declaration system for all goods and commodities. The ASYCUDA electronic platform, developed by the United Nations, now requires traders to declare goods before completing financial transfers. When goods arrive at the border, customs officials verify the pre-declared information. This is not a paper system that can be bribed. This is a digital system that tracks everything. Government spokesman Bassem al-Wadi stated that ASYCUDA is not a local innovation, but rather an international obligation within Iraq's commitments to combat currency smuggling and money laundering. One of its key goals is ensuring fair competition in trade. On February 11, the Director General of the Iraqi General Customs Authority announced that the Kurdistan region has begun responding to the unification of customs tariffs with federal border crossing. Advanced understandings are in place to implement the ASYCUDA system across all points of entry. For years, one of the largest leaks in Iraq's financial system was the differential between federal and Kurdistan region customs duties. Traders would import goods through the region, pay lower tariffs, and then smuggle those goods into federal Iraq without paying the difference. The dollars that should have flowed into the central bank's reserves instead flowed into private pockets. That leak is now being sealed. The shift is from a country that tolerated leakage to a country that enforces borders. On February 9, in Erbil, Governor Alaq stood beside Prime Minister Masar Barzani and launched eSol, a unified electronic payment platform for the Kurdistan region. Alaq stated, "Everyone now understands that handling transactions with cash alongside complex economic demands is no longer sustainable. Establishing a secure and transparent electronic financial system is essential to restoring citizens' confidence in the banking sector." eSol allows citizens to pay government bills instantly through mobile applications, digital wallets, and partner banks. It operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no additional fees. For decades, government payments meant physical cash, long queues, and opaque transactions. Now they mean transparency, efficiency, and records The shift is from cash dependency to digital transparency. On February 5th, Governor-elect met with U.S. Chargé d'Affaires Joshua Harris in Baghdad. They discussed dollar sales, banking reforms, and ongoing cooperation aimed at strengthening Iraq's financial and monetary stability. Harris praised the significant reform initiatives undertaken by the Central Bank of Iraq and affirmed the United States' full readiness to continue supporting the efforts of the Central Bank of Iraq, enabling it to achieve its goals in enhancing financial and monetary stability. This is the international cooperation that the old direction lacked. The shift is from isolation to integration. Since November, Iraqi banks have had to comply with SWIFT international transfer system criteria to access their foreign reserves held at the U.S. Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve examines every request, and if there are any suspicions about the final destination, it stops the transfer. Since this mechanism was adopted, about 80% of transfer requests have been blocked due to compliance concerns. 80%, that number keeps appearing. It is the number of currency outside banks. It is the number of transfers blocked. It is the number that defines the gap between the old Iraq and the new. The shift is from evasion to compliance. On February 16th, the central bank issued a directive that further tightens control. They announced that applicable laws do not recognize any discrimination between different editions of the U.S. dollar. Banks must stop treating old bills as less valuable than new ones. This matters because parallel market operators have long used the excuse that they need to charge more for old dollar bills to justify their higher rates. That excuse is now illegal. The shift is from excuses to enforcement. On February 22nd, KBR announced it had been awarded a major contract by the Basra Oil Company to provide integrated field management services for the Majnoon oil field, one of the world's largest with estimated reserves of over 38 billion barrels. This project is expected to generate significant local employment, with an initial estimated workforce of approximately 2,000 in-country personnel. KBR emphasized its commitment to knowledge transfer and training for Iraq's dynamic engineering sector. The shift is from extraction to development. On February 16th, the second Kark investigation court recovered 30 billion Iraqi dinars in a financial fraud case. The money was recovered from a company that violated the law by fraudulently profiting from exchange rate differences through cross-border money transfers. The rule of law is expanding. The message is clear. The old ways of profiting from the system's opacity are ending. The shift is from impunity to accountability. The Central Bank of Iraq has embarked on one of the most comprehensive banking sector reforms in the country's modern history, partnering with international consultancy Oliver Wyman to restructure both private and state-owned financial institutions. Governor-elect has characterized these efforts as deep structural changes, aimed at rebuilding the entire banking system, emphasizing that compliance is not optional but rather a strategic necessity. Financial inclusion has surged from less than 10% in 2018-2019 to approximately 40% currently, supported by expansion of point-of-sale terminals and growth in bank accounts. Beginning in June 2025, all government payments transition to electronic systems, prohibiting cash transactions across government institutions. The shift is from exclusion to inclusion. Now, let me give you the market reality as of today, February 24, 2026. The official central bank rate stands at 1,320 dinars to the dollar, unchanged since February 2023. The parallel market trades around 1,500 to 1,550 dinars per dollar. The gap represents the friction of transition, the premium that the shadow economy demands for operating outside the formal system. But the gap is narrowing, not because the official rate is moving, but because the parallel market is being starved. The ASYCUDA system limits the flow of goods that can be sold for dollars outside the official channels. The Federal Reserve blocks suspect transfers. The digital platforms make cash less necessary. The rule of law makes evasion riskier. The shift is from a country where the parallel market dictated terms to a country where the parallel market is slowly dying. On February 8th, hundreds of traders protested in Baghdad against the new customs tariffs, which in some cases reached 30%. They reported that container fees had surged from around 3 million dinars to as much as 14 million, and that infant milk fees rose from about 495,000 dinars to nearly 3 million. The protesters accuse influential groups of facilitating the release of goods in exchange for lower unofficial payments, calling it widespread corruption. But the government is not backing down. The Federal Supreme Court dismissed a legal challenge against the customs tariff decision, citing the absence of legitimate interests. Prime Minister Sudani has personally directed support for standardizing procedures at all border crossings to ensure fair competition and protect local products. The shift is from a government that caves to pressure to a government that holds the line. al-Alaq explained the philosophy. If we link the topic of changing the exchange rate to the budget deficit, it means we have set a shaky foundation for the future of the national currency in Iraq. He said, stability is a fundamental condition for achieving economic and investment movement. The shift is from reactive crisis management to proactive foundation building. Most people missed it because they were watching the wrong things. They were watching the exchange rate, not the reserves. They were watching the political deadlock, not the economic execution. They were watching the protests, not the reforms. The shift is real, it is structural, it is irreversible. The question is whether you will continue to miss it.